Summer 2017 marks 100 years of service at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. Let's take a look at one page from the logbook of Selfridge history and heritage. The grandson and nephew of 19th century admirals, Thomas E. Selfridge Jr. graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in the same year the Wright brothers first took flight at Kitty Hawk, 1903. After joining an experimental flying group organized by famed telephone inventor Alexander Graham Bell, Selfridge was assigned by the Army to test a Wright brothers flyer at Fort Myer, Virginia. The first military officer ever to fly an aircraft and to design one as well, Selfridge was flying as a passenger with Orville Wright on September 17, 1908, when the plane crashed, leaving Selfridge as the world's first fatality of an airplane crash. 9 years later, a new military airfield in Michigan would be named in his honor. When America entered World War I in 1917, the nation needed to quickly expand its military and start an air force, essentially from scratch. Henry B. Joy, the president of the Packard Automobile Company and a Spanish-American War veteran, leased his Joy Aviation Field near Mount Clemens to the government for use as a training center. Company G of the 32nd Michigan Infantry Division marched onto the property on July 1, 1917, and Selfridge Field was born. A week later, on July 8th, Captain Byron Q. Jones, the first base commander, took off in a JN-4 Jenny in the first military flight at the base. Military air operations have continued at Selfridge ever since. The 1920s and 30s, the years between World Wars I and II, were busy times at Selfridge Field. Two future chiefs of staff of the Air Force served here then, Carl Spaatz and Curtis LeMay, along with scores of other future generals, helping the base to gain the nickname Home of the Generals. Numerous firsts were accomplished at the base during this era, including the Air Force's first operational use of liquid oxygen and fuel drop tanks. Selfridge Airmen also launched the first so-called Arctic Patrol, a midwinter flight along the U.S.-Canadian border to prove the viability of military aircraft in cold weather conditions. The activities of the interwar years sealed Selfridge's position as one of America's great centers of military aviation excellence. Even before Pearl Harbor, Selfridge was already contributing to America's effort in the Second World War. In a highly classified move in 1940, most of the base's pilots, newly checked out in P-40 Warhawks, quietly left the base and joined the famed Flying Tigers, a group of Americans flying in the Chinese Air Force in action against Japan. With the formal outbreak of the war, Selfridge Airmen were quickly deployed to bases in both the European and Pacific theaters, and the base itself was expanded from 625 acres to more than 3,600 acres, as it was all hands on deck to support the ideals of freedom and democracy around the world. At the time, they were known as the 332nd Fighter Group, the 403rd Fighter Squadron, and the 96th Service Group. Today, we more commonly refer to them as the Tuskegee Airmen, a group of African American aviation pioneers who, despite harsh institutional discrimination, served their country with great distinction during World War II. A group of these airmen served at Selfridge during the Second World War, and the history at the Michigan base is filled with stories of ugly bigotry, including the shooting of a quote-unquote colored enlisted man by the base commander, shot only based on the color of his skin. Despite these and other hardships, the dedicated service of the Tuskegee Airmen during the war ultimately led to the complete desegregation of the armed forces after World War II. It was audacious. It was ridiculous. fighter aircraft simply could not fly from the U.S. to Europe. The Americans were at a clear disadvantage in the early days of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. But not so, said Colonel David Schilling, commander of the 56th Fighter Group at Selfridge. Working in secret with a few colleagues, Schilling cooked up the plan for Fox Able 1, or Fighter Atlantic, for the first time at Selfridge. In July of 1948, Schilling, who had been a fighter ace in World War II, took off in a flight of P-80 Shooting Stars, the first jet ever to be used at Selfridge. After refueling stops in Canada, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, the P-80s landed in Germany, ready to refuel and rearm for any contingency. Thanks to that flight from Selfridge, America was now truly a global air power. At the height of the Cold War, the nation lived in fear of a nuclear attack. Could Soviet Union bombers fly over the North Pole and attack the industrial heartland of America? The airmen and soldiers of Selfridge stood at the ready, the last line of the nation's defense. The base was the hub for a series of anti-aircraft missiles that ringed the Detroit region, and Selfridge fighters stood on 24-hour alert, ready to repel any attack from the sky. More than 80 times in the Cold War, Soviet bombers and Selfridge fighters would meet over the northern reaches of Canada as each side tested the other's capabilities. Fortunately for all involved, this story ends without a shot being fired.
By 1971, America had firmly entered the jet age.
The Air Force looks to reduce its number of bases. Old Selfridge Field is assigned to the Michigan Air National Guard, and units that had operated at Detroit Metro Airport are reassigned to be located at the base near Mount Clemens. The Guard takes over what has been, since day one, the most complex and unique Air National Guard base in the nation, with units from every military service operating at Selfridge. This diverse mission set has evolved over the years, but today at Selfridge you will continue to find uniforms from the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard alongside the Air Force on duty every day at Michigan's hometown Air Force Base. It was one of the darkest days in modern American history. Terrorists attacked New York and Washington, D.C. using hijacked airliners. At Selfridge, the base was on a peacetime posture as a sunny Tuesday morning dawned. But on September 11, 2001, Selfridge quickly moved to a wartime footing. Armed F-16 fighter jets were launched over Detroit, and security forces personnel locked down the base. Pilots and maintainers worked and slept from tents next to loaded fighter jets on the flight line, ready to defend America. Over the next several years, thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from Selfridge would deploy to fight in the global war on terror, some never to return. Today, Selfridge provides the nation with highly skilled military personnel, ready to respond like the Minutemen of old in the greatest tradition of America's sons and daughters. First organized as the 107th Aero Squadron in World War I, the Red Devils of the Michigan Air National Guard began meeting in a Detroit garage in 1925. Given federal recognition in 1926, the 107th is one of the nation's oldest existing military flying units. In World War II, the unit flew reconnaissance over D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge. During the Korean War, the squadron moved to Arizona to serve as a training unit for new combat pilots. And it was the Red Devils who launched F-16s to protect the American heartland on September 11, 2001. Today, flying the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the 107th Fighter Squadron has deployed repeatedly in recent years in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. They are Michigan's citizen airmen. First created as a fighter escort unit to escort heavy bombers over Germany in World War II, the 171st has been part of the Michigan Air National Guard since 1946. Flying the F-106 Delta Darts as an air defense unit in the 1970s, the squadron picked up the nickname the Michigan Six-Pack. Through F-4 Phantoms, C-130 Hercules, and today's KC-135 Stratotankers, the Six-Pack nickname has stuck. Flying the KC-135 since 2007, the 171st Air Refueling Squadron has served repeated deployments in the Middle East, the Pacific region, and in Europe. These Michigan Airmen help provide the U.S. Air Force with a true global reach and represent Michigan to the world. Selfridge Air National Guard Base commemorates its centennial of service to state and nation with a free open house and air show on August 19th and 20th, 2017. To learn more about Selfridge, visit our website and be sure to follow us on Facebook.